Good evening, everybody, and welcome. This is Terry Talks. My name is Marlies Schweitzer, and I am the chair of the Department of Theater at York University, located in the School of the Arts, Media, Performance, and Design. And on behalf of the department and school, I am delighted to welcome you, and to some of you to welcome you back for our second evening of the Terry Talks series. Now, many of you are aware of Michael Greyeyes' impressive resume, including his award-winning work as an actor, dancer, choreographer, director, not to mention his achievements as an educator and scholar. In 2021, Michael won the Canadian Screen Award for Best Actor for his performance in the zombie film Blood Quantum, and he was most recently nominated for 2 Gotham Awards for his role as Terry in Rutherford Falls and his performance in the film Wild Indian. Tonight, Michael has invited his Rutherford Falls co-star, Kimberly Guerrero, to speak with him on the subject of Native families versus the tropes of disempowerment. Kimberly Guerrero is a contemporary Native American storyteller, actor, screenwriter, and director who enjoys a career in film, television, and theater. Some of Kimberly's recent film credits include Julie Taymor's inspirational Gloria Steinem biopic, The Glorias, where Kimberly plays legendary Cherokee chief Wilma Mankiller opposite Julianne Moore, the gritty revenge thriller and winner of the 2021 Tribeca Film Festival Audience Award, Catch the Fair One, and the powerful new feature Montana Story with Haley Lou Richardson and Owen Teague. Having made a mark early on in her career playing Jerry's Native American girlfriend on Seinfeld, you might remember her from that, Kimberly has gotten back to her comedy roots, appearing in 3 groundbreaking new shows: Sierra Teller Ornella's brilliant Rutherford Falls, the Sterling Harjo Taika Waititi hit Reservation Dogs, and the exciting new Netflix animated series Spirit Rangers. On stage, she originated the role of Jonah in the Tony Award-winning play August Osage County, and also starred in Mannahatta at the Public Theater in New York, and the Fry Bread Queen at Native Voices LA. In 2014, Kimberly co-founded the award-winning Indigenous filmmaking team, the Style Horse Collective, and has worked extensively with Native nations across North America for over 2 decades, using filmmaking as a tool to empower youth and promote wellness in tribal communities. Additionally, Kimberly is the current artistic director at UC Riverside, where she serves as an associate professor in the theater, film, and digital filmmaking department. And before I turn things over to Michael and Kimberly, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that York University, where both Michael and I work, is located on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Tekaronto has been taken care of by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat, and it is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. At York, we acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and this area is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which is an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. And today, the Great Lakes region was hit by a tremendous snowstorm, so we are digging ourselves out, and the feeling of community is definitely something that many of us are experiencing anew. I recognize that many of you here tonight may be joining us from outside Toronto, and so I also encourage you to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional caretakers of the land where you reside. Last few things. For those of you who may wish to make access or use closed captioning, there is a button available on the bottom of your screen, which you can click on to gain access. And please note that this session is being recorded. I know several of our audience last week were wondering where or when it might be available, the recordings, and we've decided with Michael's consent that we will be posting the videos on our AMPD YouTube channel likely in February, so after the series has concluded. So if you missed one of them, stay tuned. We will be sharing all of the videos once the series has concluded. And then there will be a Q&A session at the end of this evening. If you have questions that come to mind during the conversation, you can certainly put them. There's a little Q&A button that you may see at the bottom of your screen. You can post your questions there, and then Michael and Kimberly will turn to them, time permitting, at the very end. So on that note, thank you all again for being here, and over to you, Michael and Kimberly.
Hello, everyone. I'm speaking to you from Los Angeles. Thank you so much, Marlise, for that gracious welcome. Los Angeles is located on Chumash, Tongva, Kizh, and Tataviam territories, and I am grateful to be living here and working here as I complete episodes 7 and 8 of the second season of Rutherford Falls. I have a very special guest today, as Marlise indicated, and I had a special little greeting created to welcome my special guest, Kimberly Guerrero. Kimberly, come on into the Zoom.
And thank you for that Rutherford Falls greeting. Loved it, Michael. And thank you, Marlise.
I'm so delighted that you can join me, Kimberly. You are an associate professor like me at one of our institutions of higher learning, and you're a compatriot, you're a director, an actor, a writer, and you play Renee Thomas, my wife, Terry Thomas's wife, on Rutherford Falls. I'm so excited that you can join me.
I'm thrilled to be here and talk about this topic. Is so fascinating to me, and I think incredibly fresh and relevant and important. Cool.
I want to share something that initiated a discussion that Kimberly and I have been having over the last little while. There is a marvelous, I think many in Canada probably know of Kim Harvey, who is from the Syilx and Chilcotin nations. She is an award-winning director, writer, playwright, actor. She won the 2020 Governor General's Award for Kamloopa, an Indigenous matriarch story. I follow her on Instagram, and I love what she talks about in terms of the kinds of stories that are emerging within this era of Indigenous narrative sovereignty. I want to read you some of her posts on Instagram. I encourage you to follow her. She is brilliant. She posted, just a couple of weeks ago, this Instagram post. If selling or performing pain worked, then the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Canada, would have. And by worked, we can define that as sustained healing, gained sovereignty, and balanced power. Performing pain is to assuage the white man's guilt and uphold their power. It is why those stories win the awards. That's blown me away, like in so many ways. Like I've been thinking about it constantly since I read it. Our history is, a profound and deep one, Kimberly. We are the survivors of genocide. Our communities are built around our resilience. Our stories celebrate this, our kinship ties celebrate this, reinforce this. But as I said last week, when I talked about the sort of the history of the Indian image, and the Indian image is a contested site where lots of people want to gain access to it or control it or reinvent it or reinscribe it. One thing catches people's imagination or catches their interest, and that is our pain, our history of trauma, our history of surviving violence. And so in my career, and I've been in this a few decades now, I've played all kinds of broken, right? Our history, our complex history, includes broken people, survivors. And these are incredible characters to play. Like, for example, a soldier. I played a soldier, Brett Woodard, in True Detective, and he was a survivor, and he was so profoundly broken, but beautiful to play, because I think what we do, as my friend Yvette Nolan, great writer, director, said, we always find hope in our characters. We push that forward as a matter of political might.
Yes.
Might of our hearts. And I look back on all the families that we've been in. We did The Lost Child together. We were in Geronimo. That was my first film. That's the first time I worked with you, way back in 1993. Oh my God. And you look at what happened to Geronimo's family in that story, the conflict, the violence that surrounds our history with the settler state. And I think it's a history of pain. It's a history of cinematic pain. And I really would love to know your opinion about the kinds of characters you've played. Your career has been really diverse, really, really beautiful. Have you been able to sort of think about this history of performing our trauma, our history? Have you had a chance to think about that?
Yeah, since we spoke, and particularly since you brought the extraordinary kind of phrase, tropes of disempowerment, because I think sometimes, in this battle, that, you're so in the thick of it, you're so in the fray that you don't have time to take a breath and step back and put words to it. It's about the maintaining of the hope in the midst of the struggle, and taking the blows and processing through them, and and moving forward, and celebrating the wins when you can get them. And so it's kind of been a dual thing of looking back and on my own career at the times when I am in the midst of playing a broken person, and also in the times of those, like the period piece that we worked on, say Geronimo. I think of that extraordinary scene where you and I and Joseph Running Fox, who plays Geronimo, there's a cavalry officer that's about to kill Geronimo, and I'm holding a baby who is our nephew, because I've saved the baby. The cavalry's coming through and scalping particularly women in that scene. And so we're grabbing anybody that we can to try to get them out of there. And then I get a gun and shoot the cavalry guy. He in turn shoots me. I'm going down to and then you come and you get the baby.
Yeah.
And drag the baby, to safety, and blood everywhere, and the tears of seeing, I think of our extraordinary Native stunt woman that did that scene, and just, the reality there, and being there with it was actually Cochise's people. Many of the tribe tribal peoples were there, and talking to them about the history, and thinking like, that's where we met. Yeah. And then, fast forwarding to working on Charmed, where you play my brother. And, I'm like getting yanked off the whatever by probably another cavalry dude. And I got so good at enacting violence and being on the other end of violence, good meaning technical at it, making the right vocal gestures, or throwing basically it's stunt work. And then marrying that with the existential reality of knowing that my grandmothers and great aunts and then, the people within my own family, not to mention the people that I'm representing, that they lived this experience, but that I have embodied experience in we do. And, the genetic our genetic trauma that is passed down. And so it's this really extraordinary mixture of being able to kind of expiate some of that. And honor it. And it's like poetry of witness.
Right.
In many ways. And with the marriage of the very highly technical craft of acting for film and television. So, I think it's a process that I'm very extraordinarily grateful to be a part of, because it's helping me. I'm still in process. You're still in process. We all are still in process of waking up from the sucker punch, of settler state and colonization and genocide. But we are waking up. I mean, we're living in that, that the EMTs, I don't know if they do it in Canada as well, but they say like alert and oriented times 0 times 1 times 2. And it depends on, do you know what the day is? Do you know what your name is? Do you know where you are? Do you know who the president is? All those questions. And it's like coming to, and then even within coming to, kind of processing through those cycles of grief, but as communities, as clans, as families, as individuals, as in, kind of as entire people groups as well, kind of walking through that. So I've been a part of that and been grateful for it. And I just hit a place probably about 2-3 years ago where I was at capacity of wanting to play disempowered natives. I've never, and you've done the same thing. I've never taken a role that I felt compromised our people's integrity, or perpetuated a stereotype. I've turned some casting directors off. I've pissed some people off, but some folks really listened, and we turned entire scenes around. Or entire whatever. And, not all battles were won by any stretch of the imagination. I think of the Lost Child, which is a really lovely, one of the bright spots in our careers together on camera. But I think, do you remember when we were out doing the round dance, and we're in Dene territory, and Dene's like traditionally that's kind of, you're wearing that Oklahoma vest, from your friend that just made this journey. And like, that's like, right. Like we round dance back in Oklahoma. They round dance in a lot of different places, but it's a really particular kind of dance. And it's really not what Navajos do, Dene people do when they get around. And it was like, I was talking to my Dene friends, I'm like, no, kind of more, we do back and forth dances. And I'm like, well, so then we're trying to talk to the AD, and they're like, no, like, this is what we're doing. Like, this is our vision. So then the non-native AD is teaching this beautiful bevy of Dene people who are like dressed to the nines, because this is how to be native and get out there and dance.
Yeah. Like I last week I called it this crazy conflation of real and faux. Like it's like we are real people, and then but we're involved in this faux idea of us, right?
Exactly.
Thank you for speaking so beautifully about that. And yeah, it's like, as participants, like we are citizens, right? Like we are participants in the reenactments. Like, so we are reenactors, right? We are reenacting the experience of violence, the experience of surviving or not surviving the violence, the trauma, like we are like, it's like, what kind of party are you going to be, being invited to? It's like, oh, we're going to just, we go on a cruise. It's going to be a lot of fun. What's the journey? Oh, the journey is, the Sand Creek Massacre, or some other horrific thing like that, or Indian removal, and it's like, this is the story. And oh, okay. We know that, the two settler states of Turtle Island obfuscate history. They hide it. They hide it because it makes people feel bad about being here and what's happened. So we know that by participating, we're actually telling stories that are elided or erased, so there's part of that as citizens that we're telling history that doesn't get told. But at the same time, we're like, who's funding it? Who's this for? Like, we know about those histories. Like, we know about MMIW. We know about contemporary and past trauma. As Native people, we don't have to relive it. Like, we're kind of like living in the bubbling aftermath of it, right? So I start to question, it's like, well, why are we reenacting that? If we move beyond the history of it, and then it starts to question, it's like, okay, so who's funding that? Why are audiences eager to see us in reenactment of that history of violence, right? Like, you talked about violence towards women. I think everybody listening to this lecture knows about the Bechdel test, right? How cinema treats female characters, women in these stories. Scholars, critics from our community have come up with another one, the Isla test. The Isla test, of course, is based on the Isla character played by Devery Jacobs in Rhymes for Young Ghouls. And the Isla test is such a provocation. It's so clear, right? There's only 2 questions in the Isla test, whereas like with the Bechdel, there's a couple of extra. But in the Isla test, there's only 2. It's like, does a Native female character experience violence or die in this story? And 2, is she a love interest for a white man in the story? Those are the 2 questions in the Isla test, right? And it's like, holy crap. Do you know how many stories that we've done, that we've, contributed our talents to, improved, done? How many stories don't pass that test? And so, there's like this really tricky history. It's like, why are Native women the targets of violence inside these cinematic stories, these narratives? What is being amplified or reiterated by the presence of that violence? Like the story you told us about being on the set of, I remember that scene. I remember how harrowing it was when we did that back in Arizona in the 90s, right? Like, we take that on and it's like, oh God, that was intense. That was horrible, and we bear it and we take hits, right? Like we take body blows for being involved in it and retelling it for lots of different reasons. But in the end, I think, are people comfortable? Has cinema ingrained in audiences a level of comfort in seeing Indigenous people and women in these tropes, in these continued narrative patterns, right? Like that's something I'm sitting with a lot. And I think about even our own stories, like stories coming out of our communities, where is the comfort of that? Like, do we know, because audiences are familiar with that, that is what is going to help us sell that script? And when Kim Harvey wrote this, performing our pain, is really a cathartic event, right? A cathartic built like into the theater, right?
Oh yeah.
Performing, to assuage white men's guilt and uphold their power. Like in a way, is that just another way of restating white power, that we're recipients of violence? And but the crazy thing is, she goes, but it's why those stories win awards. It's like, oh, holy cow. So even they uphold. So when we have stories, Indigenous stories, where joy is like, or positivity, or some other element is introduced as part of that story, do audiences go, that is really different. That's super different. Like think about Latinx communities, or the Black community. or the Asian American community, any community of color. And we look at how those stories are portrayed. Like how many, like there's lots of slave stories, 12 years a slave, roots, like there's just so many, right? Like, and what is the, whom is that story for? How does it re-examine those narrative patterns, to whose benefit? And then I go, there's an interest, 12 years a slave won the Oscar.
Yeah.
Important story, great performances, all of that, big studio behind it. But a story about Black joy, those don't win awards. Those aren't elevated in the same way, right? So I'm like, oh, Gentified just got canceled, on Netflix.
No.
Yeah.
Season 2 was but season 1 was amazing too, but season 2 was so good. They're just like,
yeah. So it's like, what stories keep getting told?
Man.
And so that's, that brings me to us, right? That brings me to Rutherford Falls. And, the incredible work that you've done, the incredible work that Sierra Teller Ornelas, our showrunner, and all our writers have done, Tasba, Rupinder, like all these people, Ty, to reimagine an Indian family that's on TV. So can I ask you, when you got the script for Rutherford Falls, and I read with you in your audition,
right here, right in this room.
What was your first thought? What was your first thought when you read this? I'll call it a radical provocation. The Thomas family is a radical provocation of Indigenous empowerment and wholeness in a climate that loves our brokenness. What was your thought when you read it?
There was joy, like out and out joy on every imaginable level, because I didn't know for sure if I would live to get to do great comedy again. Wow. I was like, I did Seinfeld like 3 months after we wrapped Geronimo, so it's like, that's a long time, well, you're watching all the other Seinfeld girlfriends get to go off and do their wonderful comedies. And it just, so there was just pure joy and that immediate, this is going to be so much fun. I know these people, I know Renee's. I have so many Renees in my life, that it's just always so much fun to pay homage to them. I hold a lot of her in my own bones. So it just, and I, just getting to play Wilma Mankiller twice. I mean, that changes a human, getting to have Wilma in your body. So it was just, such a joy. And then when I found out that you were playing Terry, I'm like, this is, what did I do to deserve, this shot? So it was, and then I will say, and thank goodness that this opportunity came at this point in my career, because a lot of times when I get a shot like this, and I know how rare it is because we've been around the block a few times, and me as a native, like, we're the same age, but if you look at your resume or Zahn's resume and my resume, we're all three equally dedicated. I would say we're all three, equal to the task, but yours is literally 3-4 times longer than mine. Like, I get very few shots as a Native woman, and especially now as a Native woman who's not in that ingenue stage anymore. So it was a big task to walk in, that first day. Well, actually for our big scene at the lacrosse game, and just go, I love this quote, don't overreact, don't underreact, just interact. with what's there. And so it was, I was using, I teach acting here at UC Riverside, and it was just like all the techniques I have to just calm myself down. I'm prepared. Now go have fun with Michael and tell the story, because the vastness, the weightiness of what we were doing,
Right.
Of putting forth a family that, I mean, I've never really thought about it. So forgive me if I'm misstating. I can't stand when people are like, oh, we were the first this, I was like, come on, it doesn't matter. But it's like, I can't remember seeing a whole healthy, happy Native family, and just the joy of it. It kind of, that particular scene reminded me of one of my all-time, recent favorite comedies, Modern Family, and just, how much fun. I would always just go, oh my God, those actors are having so much fun. Yeah. And this was that kind of scene. And we are that kind of family where we get to be fully human and fully present and fully flawed and wonderful and unapologetically, here now and awesome.
Yeah. Okay, that's so cool. So I have a story to tell you. We had just started season 1. And your character hadn't appeared yet in the story, but they were like, oh, and we're looking for your, Sarah goes, we're looking for your wife, someone to play, Renee. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, who are you looking at? And my first thought was, first of all, I hope they don't pair me with a younger woman. Right, because I'm in my 50s.
Kind of shocked they didn't. Yeah.
I am. I should have a wife that's the same age as me. And of course Sierra nails it. I only read with one other actor. I only read with you, and I told Sierra, I was like, listen, if you want to get a chemistry read with me and whomever you're bringing in, I'd be happy to do it. And she was like, really? Okay, cool. And then she texts me and she goes, Kimberly Guerrero is auditioning for Renee, and we'd love for you to do a chemistry read with her. And I was like, yeah, perfect, right? Because we are contemporaries. This is, I would not have a young wife, right? I would have a wife that's my age. We have a family together, right? So, of course, Sierra nailed that, and the show nailed that. And then you came, and we did it by Zoom because that's how things happen nowadays. And you killed it. You smashed it. You were so funny. Do you know what Sierra said after the audition? You would say, thank you, Kimberly, and all that stuff. And she told me later, she goes, it's like you guys grew up together. It's like you guys were high school sweethearts. And it's because we knew each other. We knew each other since the 90s, right? Like here we are in the 2020, we knew each other. And she said, you could feel that Kimberly and you were so comfortable together that we were really like, not just two actors that just met each other, but that there was an inherent knowledge, like some ingrained truth to our relationship that we don't have to act, right? Nope. I respect you, love you, you're a big star. And it's like, what I don't got to act, I just have to be, with Kimberly. And that's what she said. She goes, when you guys read together, it was like high school sweethearts. Oh. And so I just love that. I just love that the process of bringing you into the family, happened. And then that day, that lacrosse game day was crazy. First of all, it was smoking hot, right?
It was so hot.
So we're like, don't melt. There we are wearing jeans, and it was supposed to be October.
Fall. Yes, exactly. It was a fall setting.
We're dying. But yeah, and I remember sitting with you in the trailer. Like I came to the set that day. I was so excited. I was like, okay, where's Kimberly? And I, ran to your trailer, and then you and I just caught up, right? We just sat in your trailer and we caught up, and we're like, what's happening? You're like, I'm at UC Riverside. I was like, oh my God. So it was like reunion, like family reunion, right?
Family reunion.
And then we did the scene, and we had Sydney Freeland as our director.
Yeah.
you know? So Native showrunner, Native director, you know, actors that have been, you know, working with each other, around each other for like 3 decades. It was literally a dream scenario, like a dream scenario. And then the writing was so funny. And then you smashed it. You smashed it. You were so damn funny. And so that, even the process of bringing you into a story like that, even like into a production, was positive, empowering. You know, like that's the kind of thing that, you know, you and I wish would have happened in Hollywood for us, for a lot of shows that didn't. So the show is built around those kinds of good protocols, good way of doing things. And then we present characters that are in a good way, you know, that they relate to each other, that they're funny, that they're smart, and they're empowered. Like, you are empowered. Last week when I was talking about, you know, you as a character, Renee as a character, I said, you know, everyone's scared of Terry, right? Terry, he's such a badass. Everyone's scared except Renee. Renee's not scared of Terry at all. She's like, Terry. Right? So what we're doing is we're placing Terry inside the story as a powerful character. And who's more powerful than Terry? His wife. Right? So that's a subtle statement of empowerment. Like, he's not scared of anyone. He's scared of Renee. He doesn't want to get on Renee's bad side. So I think that's a really, again, it's a radical provocation in storytelling. And of course, it was an outcome of Indigenous narrative sovereignty to create a powerful woman like Renee. What's your journey been inside her? Or do you see it differently? Do you see that journey as being different? Do you know, as an actor, what's it like to walk in her shoes?
Well, it's really liberating because I'm allowed to draw from my contemporary life. I'm allowed to be, I've noticed that, I'm going to generalize here, but I think it's important because it goes back to your point about kind of the why the tropes of disempowerment. Because I see time after time, it's even like hintified or things like that. It's a provocation against the binding narrative that we be exceptional. Because the story is, I mean, I'll just speak here for us down in the States, is American exceptionalism.
Right.
But within that American exceptionalism, you can have the Indigenous people whose land is purloined and whose genocide failed, you know, knocked us down, but ultimately failed because here we are. And then within that, and I think this is to your point, and even especially what Kim Harvey's speaking about as well, but this rematriation of our story, this rematriation of who we are as a people, and the way in general leadership happened on this planet and on Turtle Island.
Yeah.
You know, things were ruled by matriarchy. Our own American democracy, which was, of course, you know, found in the Iroquois Confederacy, that was a matriarchy. You know, it was one of the main giants things that they left out, you know, when they brought it back to Philadelphia. And when James Madison and Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson were, you know, drawing from their ways. And so it feels like this really powerful moment in time when I didn't know if I would live to see it, you know, when I get to walk out the power that's kind of humming within me as an Indigenous woman in 2022.
Right.
You know, and so it feels like uncharted waters. And yet at the same time, we have a word in our language, school, and it's kind of within our I'm enrolled in the Colville tribe in Washington State. And within, I was asking my uncles, like worldview, philosophy, and he came back to me later that week and said this idea of school, and it's the spiral, like the spiral of the smoke going up the smoke hole in a teepee. And so it's just this thing of like, it feels like uncharted waters, but also spiraling back through to who we were when, when we were, when we were in our full powers. And again, not that we're not perfect people. There were no perfect societies, but there was an ancient wisdom, and there were practices, and there were life ways that were deeply connected to the earth and deeply connected to the worlds that transcend our own physical material world. And there was interaction, there was relationship with those worlds and the beings from those worlds, and an understanding of how to take care of this world. And so it feels like spiraling back around, to that, wow, I mean, at my age, back in the day, I would have been walking in my elderhood. I would be like coming into my elderhood. Yeah. I would be the one on the grandmother's council. I would be a clan mother, or, one of those people that they're looking to me, whether I was, they're looking to the women to lead. They're looking to the women for wisdom. They're looking to the women for balance, and for intuiting where we've been, where we are now, and where we need to go.
Right.
And so it feels like a meeting of those two things. Like, I've never been here before as Kimberly, but in my DNA, it's just like, yeah, this is what we're made for. We're built for this. And maybe that's just subconsciously a threat to the powers that be.
Right. You talk about the matriarchy, and I actually think Rutherford Falls is a matriarchy.
Oh,
it totally is. It totally is. And I'm just there, like, I'm in the band. But the band leader, that's a matriarch, right? So, of course, this show is, and that episode, the Terry Thomas episode, broke.
Oh my God, your
so
scene,
many rules.
that scene
broke so many rules, right? So let's look at the images, right? So we filmed. I think we were down where were we? We were down in LA, and we were in this super nice house that they found for us, because it's like the Thomases, they live in a nice house, right?
Yes.
And so fresh squeezed orange juice, like walking the family, you were like, yo, Jimmy, get up, we gotta go. And it's just a normal family. But what was great about that, and again, a provocation, is that Native people have money. They live in nice houses. There's nothing weird about that. Nothing weird about that at all. We do not live in poverty. We are not, we are not resilient and, surviving. We're like, we're making it, we're the Jeffersons. And there's like nothing weird about that opening scene. And then I come and I'm incredible actress, young actress, Gallandillo, and she's like beating, and I'm like, what you beating there? And then it sets up that whole beautiful relationship between Maya and Terry, where, Maya's like rolling her eyes like, oh my God, Dad. Oh my God, what's with the money thing? And then later, after the lacrosse game, and we'll come back to the tailgate scene, but right after that scene, it was the scene with Maya and I in the truck. And again, the provocation of putting an Indigenous father present. Of course he's present. Why would he not be present? In a family's life with his teenage daughter, and he's trying to get her to buy into his whole capitalist spiel, and she's not having it, and they're arguing back and forth, and I get to be so goofy in that scene. I think people who watch that scene is like, oh yeah, that's Michael for sure. That's totally Michael. It's he's
as a father of two daughters yourself.
As a father of two daughters, so I've had many conversations with teenage daughters, that I don't come out on top ever. So that scene just happened, just like a normal Indigenous family scene. Like, this is Indian families.
Mm-hmm.
But there was no hint of like trouble or
Mm-hmm.
trauma or pain. It was just, I want something and she wants something. It's not the same thing. So you
Right.
think about that, like we look at drama, we look at the idea of drama, and it's like, what's at the source of drama? Conflict. Like, what it's built into the way we teach acting, it's built into our writing, it's built into direction. We're like, where's the conflict? What people want other things. Our conflict, or the conflict that narratives around us really enjoy, is our trouble.
Yeah.
You know, the results of stuff, you know, whether it's dispossession, landlessness, poverty, addiction, you know, whatever it is, that's the trouble, you know. But what about, it's like, I want to make more money from your beating and I don't, Dad. You know, like, that's the conflict, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the choice by the writers, it's a choice by our execs to displace our conflict from violence.
Right.
That's really, again, radical. I'll say it again, it's radical. It's a radical thing. But you had some really visceral responses when we were standing behind Terry's $75,000 GMC Sierra Denali, you know, truck, which, you know, I love. And there we were, you, me, you know, our son, our daughter, you know. Tell me about that moment for you. Tell me about what that felt like for you when we did that scene.
Well, I think I was amping up for the lacrosse scene, but that scene caught me off guard, and I wasn't necessarily prepped. It's just such a quick little scene. It's really kind of a transitional scene, and I just didn't prep myself. I was just having so much fun catching up with you and meeting our kids, you know, and getting to know them. I mean, the actors are kids. And being excited to work with Sydney and, you know, everything else. And just the joy. We're in the midst of the lockdown. We're in the midst of the pandemic. So just the joy of getting to be with people, you know, was already very emotional. So it was kind of all that. I'm like, wow, like, here I am as a Native woman. I'm getting to work and do the thing I love with other Native people, telling a Native story about a really cool Native family. So I get out of the van, and I see just the setup alone. I see your truck, that gorgeous Denali, my badass SUV, Renee's badass SUV. You know, our kids are gorgeous and healthy, and I just lost it. And it was just like, it was so overwhelming. I couldn't, and fortunately it wasn't, you know, it wasn't a dialogue heavy scene for me, but, you know, my eyes are puffy in that scene because it was like, I could not stop crying, but it was crying from joy. And I do think that joy is the antithesis to that trauma. I think it's the answer or to that drama that you're talking about, the conflict, the external violence and the internal joy.
Right.
You know, and that joy is growing, and that joy is empowered, and that joy is not going anywhere. You know, it's out of the, you know, it's out of the box. Like, we can't put it back. You know, it's like dynamite. It's out. Yeah. And it's just, so it was being in that moment, and then having Sydney, who I'd worked with. I just love her so much. I love our whole team, and I'd gotten to work with Sydney doing the Wilds, and so it's just great getting to be back in community with her, and then getting to work. So it's just this really rare thing that us as Indigenous folks haven't gotten a lot of opportunity. And then working on a freaking Mike Schur, Ed Helm, that whole world that does comedy, that kind of comedy just infused with hope and joy and humanity. Yeah. You know, it's like, that's our tribe. Like, we get a whole bunch of brilliant Native folks, and Mike Schur and El Hems in that world, and Rupinder and like Schitt's Creek folks, like, just like, what's happening? Yeah. Why, you know, and just being incredibly grateful, you know. So that was, you know, it's a small scene, but it meant a lot. It meant a lot. And you're like, flashing like you're like handing out money to Jimmy.
Money. I was like, here,
lacrosse.
get some of that bologna I like. And you're like, mortadella?
It's mortadella, and thank you.
Bologna.
I mean, you could just say, did I ever think I could say mortadella? This is like why I have, Michael and I are working this week. This is why I have like I never do my nails, but Renee does her nails. So this is like my first time,
That's so funny.
It's pricey, these nail things.
And I just remember you and I kind of looking at each other like, is this really happening? Mm-hmm. Is this actually a story that we get to tell? And then we're telling Chata. You know what's so cool is I follow Chata on Instagram, and he posted later, like, I don't know, like a couple of weeks later or whatever. And he was like, I was there, and, I was working with Michael Greyeyes, and Michael Greyeyes told me this scene, this moment where we are an affluent, successful, empowered family at a tailgate party of a lacrosse game. There's no issues. It's like the issues are, hey, can you get that kid a new lacrosse stick? It kind of looks ragged, don't tell him as an extra, you're asking for money. And then I'm like, hey, I want to talk with you about something. And, and you're like, kind of give that little look like, what's Terry on about? That was like the only hint of like, oh, it's not all good, because I was worried about her giving away stuff for free.
Yes. These are the problems to have.
These are good problems to have. And we told our kids, like, this is not the normal. Yeah. We've been waiting decades to be in this scene, in this kind of scene where it doesn't have all the trappings. And for me as an actor, I love to play, dark characters. And I love the brokenness of the men I've played. And it's not because I think I'm a broken person, but there's a lot of textures for me to like grab onto and explore. I couldn't use any of those with Terry. I had no basis for operating inside a character that wasn't broken. And so I was like, I just felt like I was like, I'm on like shaky ground. I don't know what I'm doing. This is so different. Like that's how traumatized, that's how traumatizing my career has been, where I didn't know how, as an actor, to just be happy and successful and content on screen. Like I was like, this is so new. I feel like I'm on the
naked.
I'm my robot. I don't know how to act.
There's something to hold on to.
Yeah, which is
I'm
like
floating.
That's crazy. And I was working with the wonderful Sherry Foster. And I just kept talking to her because like she was in Crazy Horse. She played my second wife in Crazy Horse. And she's playing a woman in the community. And she says, Michael, what's it like? Tell me what it's like. And you know what I said to her? I was like, it's fast. It's really fast. Like, we're working fast. They're asking for multiple takes. They're asking for agility. They're like, I love that take. We got it. Try something else. Try it like this. And they ask you to do something like, kind of like 2 blocks over from where you were.
Yeah, completely.
And with every take, Sydney would keep coming back. She goes, I love it. I love it. Let's pace it up. Let's pace it up. And I just kept telling Sherry, I was like, Sherry, in 30 years, I've never been asked to speak faster. And they're like, pace it up, do all the acting, all the moments, all the beats, pace it up.
Louder, faster, funnier.
And it's like, that's a radical thing to be like, the fact that I had never heard us asked to be faster reminds me of something I said last week. It's like the ponderous, solemn, slow talk of, Indian slow talk of like all these previous stories. And yeah, here I am like being asked to talk faster. And I'm like, I got to do my mouth exercises here. I got to, pronounce and all this stuff. So it was just, again, case after, like in instance after instance, in scene after scene, day after day, week after week, where the Thomas family is a provocation. It's a radical departure from the Indian families we've seen on TV before.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I mean, that's my point. Have we even really seen Indian families on TV? I mean, how many have we really seen? And it goes back to who's above the line, you know, who's really, you know, who is the showrunner, who is in the writer's room, and do they have that, you know, that, again, that embodied knowledge of what that means. But you did, you know, one of my favorite moment almost of the entire season, and I think it was an anchor for the whole season, because that last episode had me in tears. I just thought it was so, where they're going, where the writers are going, and Sierra's, you know, taking them. It's getting so deep into our heart. And it was kind of anchored by Terry's speech in that episode 4, because you were able to kind of use that, you know, kind of as to keep you aloft in that scene and driving forward. You know, it's like, let me tell you about, you know, what was that process like?
It was hard, you know, like, obviously I'm going to be talking about it in depth next week. You know, I have a whole
we'll just do a little pre, yes.
But I do remember crying when I read the script, when I read the speech. I cried because I was like, I've been waiting decades to see something like this.
Yep.
Where they ask us to be as smart as that. Like, you're bloody smart. I'm smart, you know. My kids are way smarter than me. But it's like, do we ever get to play at the height of our intelligence? Like, are the native characters the smartest characters in the story? Like Regan, Jana Schmidt's character, she's the smartest person in the story.
Oh,
and then, or like maybe Jesse, maybe Bobby is actually physically the smartest, but Terry's smart, Renee's smart. Like, these are smart people. These are really intelligent, educated people. Yeah. And so, you know, it's fun to play other things, but when that's the ground floor.
Yeah.
That's the ground floor. Oh, and then we're all smarter. Didn't you like kill it on your SATs? We all did. It's like, oh, okay. And so then they build on that, like, no, we're all smart, and we're going to write to the height of your intelligence. Where I was like, holy crap, I've never had a speech like that. One of my favorite speeches was a speech with the lawyer, you know, Blake Jensen.
That's it. Just
killer. So good. It's like, Blake, you went to Harvard, right? Like, it was so smart, right? Because Terry loves to take the piss out of people who went to good schools, because he didn't go to a good school, but he's smart, right? He loves to take the piss out of people. And he's like, you went to Harvard, right? And, you know, Blake's like, yes, Harvard Law. And I was like, there's a hall at Harvard called the Jensen Hall. Do a lot of studying at Jensen Hall. Blake Jensen. It's like, oh, they did not. They actually tackled the legacy problem inside, you know, the Ivy League and the top schools, like the elite schools. They grabbed that, they reached down, they grabbed entitlement by the throat, they pulled it out, and they shook it. And then, you know, Terry bit the kid's head off and threw him away. Like, that's smart. Like, that's such smart writing. So, you know, I think that's a really important thing to state, is that, you know, these characters are in a way smarter than us.
Oh,
and that's 100%. Something that we haven't, you know, been asked to play yet.
No.
In your own writing, in the kind of stories you want to tell, because you are a storyteller, you're you know, you've got a development deal, you're making stories. Where do you want to go? You know, now that things are shifting around us, what are your priorities for indigenizing this town and and rematriating the kinds of stories that are told about us?
Well, I think, I was forced, I've always looked up to you and admired your work in academia, and you were always able to turn me on to so many great thinkers and authors and philosophers. And I mean, people like Kim Harvey, I wouldn't have known without you. And she's basically a relative just on the other side of the border. So just things like that. And I think it was 6 years ago, I was asked to keynote a really powerful conference here that's held at UC Riverside, which was founded by Native American scholars, a husband and wife, who, so we're one of the few, if not the only, I guess we're the only university in America that's not still in land. It was actually seeded by a Cahuilla scholar back in the day, and his Cherokee wife was also a scholar. And they had it's like the 40th annual Medicine Ways conference. So this has been a long running conference. And I had brought my friend Lisa Tiger back to it in like 1992 or something like that. It was the first time I'd come to UC Riverside. And so I was familiar with this conference, and they said they wanted me to talk about my, involvement with Hollywood and storytelling, things like that. And of course you have to come up with a title. And I came up with the title because it was called Medicine Ways. I'm like, story is medicine. And so I pressed in, I started thinking about that. It goes back to what we started talking about at the beginning of our conversation, was like having to stop and look at where you've been and start articulating it for yourself. And so I really pressed into that idea of story as medicine and storytelling as ceremony. And then what happens when you don't see yourself, on television, on the film, in the films that you watch, in the media that you're taking in, like it's not there. So that lack of, you're still getting medicine. It's just, you're not a part of it. So it leaves a kind of soul hunger, a spirit hunger, that's there. And then when I started teaching acting, I was actually hired here at UCR after I graduated, that was my whole pedagogical, move was towards story as medicine. And so that's kind of just my drumbeat as a human being in general. And what the fruit that I'm trying to put out in the world is like, I want all of the shows that I work on, whether I'm writing or producing or in front of the camera and taking them, I want to make good medicine. I want to make medicine that, even if it's bitter, it's going to bring forth healing. And to Kim Harvey's point, sustained healing. And, it's good seed that like then turns around and bears fruit, and then more seeds. And it just starts, to think about somebody sitting around, their laptop and streaming a show that I'm on or that I've written or whatever. And it to start to unlock, to take out some of that poison, get it up and out. Maybe they can cry with the character or move through, that beautiful power of narrative, narrative processing, the psychological processing of how our brains work, the neuroscience behind it. So kind of, again, getting these things up and out and being able to live through these things and give people hope, but not be afraid to go there. Which I think what's so great about Rutherford Falls is that even in the high comedy and the rapid fire comedy, there's that bass note of, we're not turning our eyes away from what happened. We're not saying this, it's like yes anding, right? The rule of improv. Yes anding our brokenness. Yes, and we can still have joy,
Yeah.
And really revel in that joy and propagate that joy. So that's really at the heart of all the work that I'm doing now, is putting good medicine out in the world.
Oh, that's beautiful. Beautiful. Questions.
Yeah.
Mariana Clark writes, not a question. I just want to say how lovely it is to see my former onstage daughter. Much love to you.
Love you, Mama. She played my mama in Steel Magnolias in Nashville, Tennessee.
Amazing. Amazing.
I could.
All right. Raven
That's what I love
Cole.
about stage, right? Only on stage, only in the theater would I get to play Shelby in Steel Magnolias in Nashville, Tennessee in the 90s. I mean, what are the chances?
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna love it. Raven Cole writes to Kimberly, how old were you when you first started acting? Raven's from Georgia.
Hey, Raven in Georgia. I was 8 years old when I did my first little community theater show back in Idabel, Oklahoma. I played Amaryllis in The Music Man. And so that was how I started in stage. My mom found our community theater there. And then my first acting job for television, I was probably 22, maybe, and then worked with Michael when I was 23-ish, 24.
Ah, so cool.
Started.
All right, Angela Oberoi from last week. Hello, Angela again. Michael and Kimberly, you both really seem to love playing comedic roles. So is this the path you will both be pursuing for future project? What do you want to do?
Yes. I would love to do as much comedy as possible. Always yes. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, I want to play Terry until like Terry's in a walker. You know, he's so much fun to play. I learned so much as an actor doing comedy. So yes, 100% yes. Sharon White Fawn writes, I'm preparing to pitch a sitcom starring a young inner city Native female aspiring to be a self-employed business person in the 90s. Yeah, 90s. Do you think the industry would embrace a 20 or 30-something urban Indian female working to become an entrepreneur in the big city and not on the res? That's a good question. Yes. And again, I think urban natives, and help me with this, Kimberly, I think urban natives are not like a radical departure from, I think, how a lot of portrayals in the last 5-6 years have gone. So I think people are used to seeing urban native people, that we don't all live in the country, that we're not all riding horses and ranchers and doing pickup trucks and Yellowstone business, but that we are urban. So I don't think that's a departure. How do you feel about a young female lead that's trying to make it in the city? But how do you think this town will respond to something like that?
I think things are changing in part because, I don't know, Michael, have you found this, because I know you're a producer as well with your own development deal, that the more and more meetings that I'm taking with executives, the more and more women I'm finding. And I just had a meeting with somebody at Paramount, and it's just like they all wanted female-led stories. So, maybe even the industry is shifting that way. There's a rematriation of even storytelling. And so I don't really think, I think that we're, if you would have said that 5 years ago, I'd be like, oh, it's going to be a tough one, but not now. Not now. Yeah. Now I think, I tell my acting students, I'm teaching the business of acting right now. And I just tell them something I've learned and I'm still learning, that when you're out there pitching yourself as an actor or you're pitching a project or whatever, be the you-iest you can be. Write the story you want to watch.
Yeah.
When you walk into the room and you're introducing yourself, don't try to be the person that you think they want to be. Be you and walk in your glory, And so I think create in your glory. And then when you go and pitch, this is what I found, Sharon, is that the more on fire and passionate you are about your story, they're going to catch that fire. And even if they don't have a place in their, their slot, they don't have a slot for your story, they might think about you for another writer's room, or they may think, well, come back or that executive may go somewhere else. That's what happened with our project. Is that they left one of the giant places and went to another giant place. And then they okay, now I've got this room. Why don't you bring your project back? So it's really just about, knowing who you are as a storyteller and just knocking it out of the park, making it the show that you wanted. I think, just Phoebe Waller-Bridget, right? Fleabag would have never existed had she tried to be something else. And there's never been anything like Fleabag, because it was her story. She was, she was Phoebe. So just be Sharon and be awesome because you are.
Absolutely. And yeah, be yourself. The woman that started this conversation for us tonight, Kim Harvey, she had this whole thread on Fleabag. She finally got into it. She was like, what the hell?
Well, I know.
This is the greatest thing on TV right now. Hats off. So yeah, I think that's a really great place to wrap it up. I hope people kind of understand where we're coming from, that the idea of us, like what's stereotypical in terms of Native representation now. Like, I know that there was a fascination with our period self, our historic selves. Sure, that kind of remains in some dramas. I think there is a recognition that we're interwoven into every aspect of contemporary society, and that's, I think, where the stories that certainly I and other creators like yourself want to tell. But the ideas of people who are conflicted or lost or paralyzed or hurt contribute to a kind of narrative. I guess I'll call it a spiritual, psychic narrative in which we are victims. We're victims of history. We're victims of a society that's bigger than us, is actually the most dangerous stereotype that there can be. The disempowered Native person. Who benefits from a non-powerful Indian, right? I looked at, I was asked to audition for Power of the Dog, and I read the part, that it's in that movie of an Indigenous man that he didn't really say much, and he was kind of there, like some sort of, dummy that's beaten on by other characters, or abuse or whatever, and they were like, "This is a Jane Campion movie." I was like, "Jane Campion, holy cow! Would I ever like to be in a film with her?" And then I read the part, and I was like, "That's such a dismal representation of it, of us. Fuck them. I don't want to be anywhere near this story." Because playing a Native character that has no agency, fuck off. Like, I won't lend my name or my reputation or my work or my talent to a story where it's like it's a voiceless Native man. Honestly, fuck you. So, and I did that for another project. It's like, I'm not like rich, like I could use some more work. I got bills to pay. But I got a script earlier this summer, and the Native character was literally a doormat, and whose whole purpose in the narrative was to advance the white character's emotional journeys. And I wrote a letter to the director, and I was like, I think this is a bad story, and like, this character has no agency, and really he's there to amplify or allow for the white characters to have some kind of emotional reckoning because of whatever happens to this guy, and he dies too, like, of course he does. And I said, this is just really bad writing, and I can't be he's so disempowered, I can't do it. And the person was like, "Wow, thank you for telling me that. I wasn't really aware about that these kinds of ideas." And they rewrote the script to make it better, but still he was a punching bag for the white characters, and I ended up not doing it. So I think the idea of a disempowered Native person on screen is the worst thing we can play, because it contributes to a political, social, psychic narrative that ultimately keeps us under a thumb. And Rutherford Falls doesn't do any of that. The stories that you want to tell won't do any of that. I won't participate in something that disempowers us like that. So I just want to thank you, Kimberly. This was an incredible conversation. You're a hero to me, the work you do, the work you're doing with Renee. So thank you for lending your time, your knowledge to this discussion.
Thank you, Lim, Michael. Thank you so much for bringing me into this conversation with you, and just our community that's gathered on this Monday night, Martin Luther King Day down here in the States, and it's just an honor to get to walk by your side in this journey, and to fight the good fight with you, and now to get to do comedy with you. So it's a joy. So thank you for having me on Terry Talks.
Of course. You were my first guest, and I'm honored that you were. So listen, thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming to Terry Talks number 2. And we'll see you next week. I'm gonna be flying solo, and we're gonna talk about the speech from episode 4, the Terry Thomas episode. Marlise, thank you again for inviting Kimberly and I. Thank you, Professor Guerrero. Thank you, Professor Schweitzer. Kinenaskamten, everybody. We'll see you next week.